The US ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, having previously scolded Canadians for being somewhat negative about Trump's America, an attitude that was completely perplexing to him and seemed deeply unfair, well, he's back at it. In an interview yesterday, he was waving to one side the impact of the 25% tariffs on Canadian cars, auto parts, and 25%, 50% tariffs on steel and aluminium. Okay, in deference to the Canadians who may be watching this video, fine, aluminum. But we both know how the king would pronounce it. Anyway, Hoekstra was saying that these major tariffs were no big deal at all, and Canadians should stop whining about it. He said they're not going to have a dramatic impact, okay? And then he slightly contradicted himself. Well, they will have an impact, but it's not fundamentally going to change this relationship. Well, that's one opinion. Canada's steel industry warned of catastrophic job losses, factory slowdowns and supply chain disruption. But then, what would they know? Catherine Cobden, president of the Canadian Steel Producers Association, told the Financial Times a 25% tariff is difficult, but a 50% one is catastrophic. At that level, she said, the tariffs basically close the US market to Canada with massive consequences. But it's okay, said Trump's ambassador Hoekstra, because he thinks there will be a full reworking of the trade agreement between the US and Canada, within the next couple of years anyway. So just hold on until then. Sure, it'll all be fine. Mind you, it's worth noting that Hoekstra also scolded Canadians for going on and on about the 51st state thing, and he did that on the principle that he thought that Trump was no longer talking about that, so Canadians should just move on. He said, from my standpoint, from the president's standpoint, 51st state's not coming back. If the Canadians want to keep talking about it, well, that's their business. Yeah, well, that thought turned out to be wrong. How to say that you don't actually speak for your boss without saying that you don't actually speak for your boss. Because almost the very next minute, or at least the very next day, Trump posted on his social media platform that Ottawa was actively considering it. A hallucination that Ottawa was once again quick to contradict. But the sanctions are the main issue for now. The OECD today updated its forecast for this year and for next and said that Trump's tariffs were now expected to have even more impact on world economic growth than previously they had expected. Because yes, just a reminder, one man can single-handedly screw up lives and livelihoods across the entire planet and do so on the basis of a dodgy economic theory and completely made-up numbers. In its Economic Outlook report, the OECD said the global economy will slow to 2.9% growth this year and next, down an additional 0.2% from its previous forecast. But guess what? The OECD says that it expects that slowdown to be concentrated in the 4 countries most badly hit by Trump's tariffs. Those 4 countries are the United States itself, which no doubt will get blamed on someone else, Mexico, China, and, yes, Canada. And this, of course, in spite of the recent setback Trump got from the courts, which ruled that the majority of his tariffs, those connected to his use of the emergency powers based on declaring a totally bogus crisis, they were illegal. But the automobile, the steel and aluminum tariffs were instigated under a different process, so they remain. Will Trump back down on those tariffs as he had on a number of others? The so-called taco process? Well, maybe. In the meantime, the uncertainty and then the reality of the short-term imposition, because that 50% rate is due to kick in tomorrow, these have their effect, and it affects real people and real businesses who are trying to make ends meet. The Canada-US Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc is in Washington today to seek to persuade the administration that those tariffs should be removed. and hinting that at the very least, surely they would want to do that before the G7 meeting in Canada in 2 weeks' time. Unfortunately, he's speaking to people who can probably say whatever they like, but they do so like Hoekstra, knowing that their boss might contradict them the very next day. Still, at least Canadians can comfort themselves with the idea that for a cool $61 billion, they could be covered by Trump's Golden Dome missile defense system. Available for free if you just sign on the dotted line and get ready to pay lots of money for health coverage and stuff. The Canadian ambassador to the United Nations, Bob Rae, described Trump's so-called offer as a protection racket, which some would be unkind enough to suggest is a wholly accurate description of the United States foreign policy program in total. Meanwhile, Canada is energetically applying itself to beginning what will be the long project of building its way out of America's shadow. New Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said that the government would be fast-tracking ambitious national projects to boost the economy and build crucial infrastructure, projects such as pipelines, nuclear reactors, trade corridors. He invited provinces and the private sector to come up with proposals, things that will demonstrably benefit Canada's economy and have a high likelihood of being built successfully. So, unlike Trump's Golden Dome then. Probably. At least Carney's approach to move fast and build things seems to be a contrast to Trump and Elon Musk's application of move fast and break the entire world economy. That could be damning with faint praise, I guess, but it doesn't mean that it will all be plain sailing, of course. As ever, whenever governments decide to clear out the bureaucracy and red tape and get stuff done, you get the equal and opposite concern that various communities and environmental standards and all of that will be the victim of undue haste. Those are debates that must be had. You can understand, though, why this is one of those moments where an argument for haste, preferably not undue haste, is going to be quite a powerful one. You still want to do it with intelligence and a will to avoid the most obvious mistakes, if only to show those across the border how it can be done. Carney, who has been a champion in the past of environmental concerns, is also vowing to work with Canada's oil industry to boost production whilst also trying to reduce emissions. He offered tentative backing for new pipelines and a multi-billion-dollar project to capture carbon from Alberta's oil sands. Whether that overture will be enough to reconcile Alberta to another term of Liberal Party rule and to remove the energy from the province's separatist campaign, well, only time will tell. The oil industry in Calgary gave at least some nods of appreciation. Lisa Bayton, chief executive of the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, said, "We have recognised and appreciate the significant change in tone from Prime Minister Carney's new federal government. The projects and the strengthening trade relationships with other parts of the world will be the most important part of all of this over the next few years, for all that a lot of attention will be going to random outbursts from the White House. These will be the works in progress that will rarely attract headlines, at least if they're going well. But bit by bit, over time, they will gradually place Canada in a different position, overcoming vulnerabilities, enduring temporary hardships and coming through the other side. One day, it'll just be a reality. Canada will find itself a country with an important place in the world, and one where, when you look at the statistics, it turns out that it's not that vulnerable to economic shocks from the south of the border. Some may even wonder, how did that even happen? And I wouldn't be surprised if Trump's apparently clueless ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, wasn't amongst those people.